I want to bring in a really important perspective, which is the on-the-ground practitioner perspective. And so, our next panel is about that. And moderating our next panel, and to introduce our panelists, I want to introduce Chris Anthony. So Chris is the recently retired Chief Deputy Director at CAL FIRE after a 27-year career there. And I think has done some amazing work and been on the ground at some of the most major incidents in California over the last decade. So I think it's a really good perspective, and he's going to lead a discussion with our practitioners. So over to you, Chris.
Good morning. So before I start, I just wanted to take a minute and not lose an opportunity to thank Bill Clerico, the entire Convective Capital team, Jenny Biggs and Kate Dargan Marquez with the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and then also wanted to do a shout out to Max Brody and Rain for essentially opening up their house to us today. And so really appreciate it. It's really an honor to be able to be here, and I hope that this panel discussion is something that everyone can walk away with something meaningful from it. I'm also really honored to be up here with such an esteemed group of individuals, all of whom I admire and respect immensely for the work that they're doing and have done. So welcome to the Practitioners panel. I truly believe that we are at a crossroads where emerging innovation and fire technology has intersected with a fire service and resource management culture that has largely used the same mindset, tools, and approaches to an emerging problem, and that we are really only scratching the surface of what is possible. It's become clear to me that the challenges and the opportunities ahead of us aren't limited to California or even the Western United States, but are in fact global in scale. And I think we witnessed that in 2023. This moment in time and what we do with it largely dictates outcomes for decades to come. This moment in time and what we do with it largely dictates outcomes for decades to come. When I was with CAL FIRE, I realized that we needed to develop partnerships, understand what technologies were being developed, and implement a process so that we were able to evaluate, incorporate, and deploy new innovations. And I have to give a shout out to CAL FIRE's Deputy Director of Technology, Scott Gregory, who I know is in the room here somewhere. Scott. Thank you, Scott. Just for being such a great thought partner with me in helping me understand this space so much better. My fear was that we would fall behind. And to me, that would have been shameful, considering that California has been at the epicenter of some of the most destructive fires, and yet is the global hub of technology and innovation. As practitioners, it's imperative that we take the time to understand, incorporate, and deploy new innovations. Our relationship with fire is complex, and at times can seem like somewhat of a paradox. There are some people who believe that we can't live with it, when in fact, many of our ecosystems can't live without it. So there's this tension that exists between bad fire and good fire, and what role technology plays in that. Yet, the impact to human beings, communities, economies, and watersheds has risen to an unacceptable level, which is interesting because it has inspired so many people with such diverse backgrounds and skill sets to seek durable solutions to the problems that we're facing. And for that, I thank each and every one of you that are here. I am so grateful for the work that you're doing. So in today's panel presentation, we plan to dive a little bit deeper into some of these themes, and hope you enjoyed. I want to give each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves as well, and so I'll go ahead and start with Sasha.
Hi folks, I'm Sasha Berleman. I'm the director of the Fire Forward program at a local nature conservation organization known as Audubon Canyon Ranch. And the Fire Forward program is a prescribed fire and stewardship capacity building program. So we train workforce to implement prescribed fire safely and effectively, and to implement other stewardship objectives as well. And we implement a lot of prescribed fire. I think at this point our program's done over 5,000 acres of prescribed fire in the last 5 years. And a lot of that locally in the North Bay area. So I think that's a summary. Do you want us to give a background on ourselves or just pass it? I'll do that, pass it.
Thanks, Sasha.
Yeah.
So Kate Dargan, Marquis, and thank you, everyone. So this is my 46th year in the wildfire community. I probably am one of the senior folks in our community here today. And I mention that because I'm going to bring a lens to our discussion today of those 46 years, the first 30 of which were seasonal firefighter at CAL FIRE all the way through an appointment by Governor Schwarzenegger as the State Fire Marshal of California in the mid-2000s. And I was air operations, Type 1 teams, line firefighter, both wildland and structural, all sorts of operational background. And then when I got to the State Fire Marshal's office, got heavily involved with mitigation, the building codes, our insurance issues. When I retired from CAL FIRE, I co-founded a software company still out there today that does wildfire common operating platforms, also for Metro Fire. So I was a firefighter turned tech founder 13 years ago. When I looked at our audience, our future prospective customers, and they just looked back at me with blank eyes, like, why would we even need that? And then I had a chance to work, as I left the company space, I worked for the White House for a short period of time while we were passing the building infrastructure law and the IRA at the White House for the Office of Science and Technology and Policy, working on wildfire policy and helping set those bills in motion that we're currently funding with today. And that led me to my journey with the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation and helping Jenny and that amazing team of folks decide and develop the Wildfire Resilience Initiative strategy that we'll be working on for the next 12 years. So I'll bring all of that today, and I'll enjoy this conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, Bob Roper. My career has been like Kate. It's been 46, 47 years in the California Fire Service. I was the county fire chief in Ventura County for 15 years, grew up there. And then I went over to Nevada as a state forester, and then Kate asked me to come on to the California Fire Safe Council, where she and I co-chaired it for several years. Currently, I serve on the Western Fire Chiefs as a policy advisor, which is the 11 Western states. And I had the distinct pleasure of being appointed to the Congressional Wildfire and Mitigation and Management Commission, where there's, how many of you are on the commission? Raise your hand so everybody can see. Those of you? Find them out there today and pick their brains on what's behind the report. That's important. My perspective to bring to you today is I constantly get peppered through the Western Fire Chiefs by many of you as startup companies and so forth. How do I break into the market? I'm going to bring you a perspective of local government, state government, and so forth to give you words of encouragement, and hopefully when you walk away, we can spend more time networking.
All right, thank you so much. And again, Chris Anthony recently retired from CAL FIRE, but not from the profession. I had an opportunity to work both in resource management, fire prevention, law enforcement, fire protection and administration before ending in an appointment as the Chief Deputy Director, which was by far the best job that I had with the department. Kind of wrapped all of those positions up into one and then some. But just thankful for the opportunity to continue moving this forward, as we know that there's a lot of needs. So moving into just kind of setting the baseline for the discussion. As practitioners, why is it important as practitioners that we take the time to adopt and look at deploying and bringing in new innovations into this space?
Well, I'll just start with, in our world, we have seen that our fire world is reacting differently than we've ever seen it in the past. Yet we're using some of our existing practices and expecting different results. We have to understand that the world is changing and we should have a forward-looking thought process about it. We also have to understand that the influx of money from state government, federal government, and so forth is only here for a certain amount of time. It will disappear, and it will go to other areas of importance, especially as climate change continues to increase.
I'll echo that. We're not doing it right yet. We're not doing it the way that our environmental conditions, and I mean those writ large, are going to demand from us. Our problem set, I think of things often in graph form. Our problem set is growing at a faster curve rate than our solution set, even today. Our problem is getting bigger. As we sit here, it is growing faster than the solution set. So we need to get our solution set sped up, and technology is a fundamental component of that. But from a practitioner's perspective, technology development isn't really the hardest piece of it. It's the adoption curve behind the technology development. And that's a really important part, and one of the reasons the practitioner panel I think is important. The adoption curve is even slower than the tech development curve.
I'm going to bring in a slightly different perspective here. My background, my entire career has been focused on prescribed fire stewardship and reintroduction of a positive relationship with prescribed fire to California culture. Our ecosystems are adapted to fire, and they're not only adapted to fire, but adapted to stewardship of fire and ecosystems by people. The last 100 years of fire suppression, and more than that, now has absolutely decimated our ecosystems, and it's the cause of the problems that we're having now with the way wildfire acts and the way we interact with wildfire. If we continue focusing on that mindset, we will just perpetuate this problem. For me, as a steward of landscapes and working with community to steward prescribed fire on these landscapes and restore those relationships with land and that positive relationship with fire, the use of technology is around resetting those problems that we've created that are so far out of hand now that they're almost intractable without that use of technology. So ecosystems that were oak woodland, where the oak trees are now dying because the amount of Douglas firs that have encroached is way beyond what they can handle. And coastal prairies that have had coyote brush and Douglas fir encroach and almost completely obliterate them. It's the most diverse ecosystem of grasslands in North America, and there's less than 5% of it left. So for me, the use of technology is around saving these critical and beautiful ecosystems that we care about and love, and in doing so, restoring a positive relationship with land and fire that people are meant to have in these landscapes.
So when Bill Clerico and Nicole Lakina met with myself and Scott in Sacramento, and I can say some of these things now that I don't work for Cal Fire, they had me at hello. And I really saw the value in what it was that they were doing. And I think with a lot of the fire chiefs that I see in the room, they are the ones that are the early adopters, the ones that are the forward thinkers, that see the value of technology and innovation. But simply being an early adopter by itself doesn't necessarily mean that everything's just going to happen like that, right? and because there are processes that you have to go through, especially in public service. And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss an opportunity to at least talk about procurement, and it's such a bureaucratic word just all by itself. But thinking about it's one thing to want to adopt technology, it's really quite another to actually procure it and ingest it and bring it in. And I'm curious what kind of thoughts, recommendations you might have specific to recommendations to those that are out here that certainly are interested in that part of the equation.
One I have is get in touch with the people on the ground and talk with them about the use cases and where they see these technologies fitting in. I know for myself and a lot of my colleagues, if we're approached and someone just says like, what tech do you need? It's like, what are you trying to offer? What are the recommendations? What are you suggesting? And if you come to us with an idea saying like, hey, we're thinking about a device that can burn and in like an upside down air curtain burner that could just like burn in place where it goes. And then we can talk about how that can be really useful for creating control lines. And BurnBot does some really cool things there. I was reading about Overstory over the last couple of weeks, and there are some incredible potential uses of Overstory for identifying legacy trees of certain species that we want to really prioritize and protect for stewardship. So if we can integrate and have these conversations and like people who are working on tech development actually talk to the people on the ground who are doing this work, we can get a long way.
Thanks. Sasha, on point. This is the fire community is a peer network community. The way, and I've worked with lots of companies, and my own included, although I was fortunate enough to understand that culture when I founded. But I talk to other companies that are entering the space, and they have great solutions. One of the first things I tell them is plan on a 10-year ramp, because it just takes a while to get into that culture. It takes a while to get to know us. It takes a while to understand the depth and the complexity and the rigidity of the structure that we work in. We work in a deeply legacy-oriented, doctrine-driven culture. We do things the same way for a reason, and it makes it really hard for us to change that. So you have to develop your champions. You have to make your case. It has to be on point. It has to work right pretty much the first time. Otherwise, they throw it over their shoulder and move on. And you have to be respectful and humble enough to understand that you are working with that kind of culture, and you're going to bring in a solution and let them touch it, change it, and comment on it. And you'll get there. But it does take longer than pitching your great idea over the retail fence and waiting for folks to pick it up.
You also have to understand public government is, at times, we stifle innovation, okay? Because we're such a bureaucracy. We show up to work, we do these, we follow the rules, that type of thing. To come up with new ideas is a novelty. And that's why you as entrepreneurs need to search out, where is the leadership? Where is the innovation? There's pockets. It's not widespread, but you have to find the right pockets. The other thing you have to understand is the way public government finances expenditures. A lot of times, some of your tools, technology, may require a capital investment. That's a different type of expense than if it is a service-driven cost. Different rules of engagement, different rules of limits of dollars that you can deal with. So you need to bone up on how is public government financed, and be able to understand your ways through that, and we can probably get into more details.
Understand the value of a master contract at the state and federal level.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think about in terms of my experience with CAL FIRE, and our budgeting process actually begins next month for the next year that would come out in the governor's budget. So for instance, in January of 2024, we would begin working on what the budget is going to be for January of 2025 when it gets revealed in the governor's budget. And there is a lot of work that goes into that over the course of that 12 months. you're never quite sure what's actually going to end up in the budget. And there's a lot of competing priorities for that too. Much of, and a question that I have for the group really is, I was thinking a lot about, do our budgets accurately reflect the direction that we need to go with technology and innovation? And if not, what do we need to do to be able to get there?
I think our budgets don't accurately reflect the value that we say we place on stewardship and beneficial fire as a part of this solution. And I know that's not exactly the question you asked, but I think that if we are starting to try to create a change in culture and create a shift in the way we live with fire, we then have to all really focus on acknowledging that fire is not the enemy, and we need to change our relationship with it and the way that we work with it and the way we interact with it. And that is going to mean investing massively in the workforce to steward good fire on the landscape and just steward these landscapes in general so they're more fire resilient when fire comes through. And then with that, we can bring in the technology to support that workforce and make that a sustainable set. Right now, fire is very sexy. Everyone thinks fire is really exciting, and so there's a lot of money being poured into it, but this is a forever thing that we need to change, and we need that full cultural shift toward not how do we stop wildfires as small as possible, but how do we become resilient and become fire adapted and close with the ecosystems around us and integrated in that way. And until we have a budget that reflects that has sustainable long-term funding toward people, not just agencies, but people stewarding fire and stewarding resilient landscapes, and the technology to support those people in doing that, we will not see a change.
Our old school of thought used to be is, how many black acres do we produce? It's a tangible measurement, but is it valid? No, okay? But to get to the other, to look at the landscapes, how we treat them, then somebody will ask, well, how do I know that works if I don't run a fire into it? How can I show that? So what we have to do is evolve from the black acre and talk about quality of our landscapes, and we have to be able to come up with how do we prove by metrics or other devices that what we invest up front will, even though it's a larger cost, will lessen the recovery cost in the long run.
I think, Chris, my first part of the answer is that I think that if I were going to wave a wand and change some budgetary input for innovation right now, I would direct it inside the practitioner group. Because, and that's back to the adoption curve. It's one of the things that Chief Gregory struggles with. How do we take our legacy rigid culture and open it to change a little faster? How do we train innovation into our DNA and change management and openness toward that into our DNA in the wildfire community? And I would invest in that at the outset. And so now I'm going to take phase two, and I brought this to share with the group because we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before. This book, The Principles of Forest Fire Management, is one of our source origin doctrine Bibles, if you would, for wildland firefighting. Originally written in 1954, this edition was published in 1966. Raymond Clark was one of the authors. And chapter 13 talks about what of the future, 1966. I share with you, there is little doubt that some variety of helicopter will be the most important motorized piece of equipment on the fire line. Well, we just got there with a whole bunch of new Firehawks for California and QRFs in Southern California, and we're getting there with our helicopter use, but now we're expanding past that with our autonomous vehicles in fires. If we're looking out, if this is 50 years in the future where they were envisioning, it took us 50 years to get to detection of heat by infrared scanning will unquestionably find a prominent place. It is one of the amazing new devices in a world that has seen men ride skyrockets into near space. So we're getting there with infrared, not quite fully there yet, but almost. We will work with different retardants. And last, automated data processing at the present time is now regarded as a miracle tool, but someday we will use computers to help us fight fires. But then again, never underestimate, and this is a nod to Michael Wara, never underestimate the value of rest and a hot meal on the fire line for what that does for productivity. So I wanted to share that because it's a little fun, but it's about how do we look to the future, but recognizing that even with technology, we're standing on the shoulders of people 50 years ago who were envisioning the things that we're talking about today.
Okay, can I just build on that, though? We have those things today, and none of it's working. The problem's getting worse. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect something to be different. So we have to change the way we're doing that, and that means changing the way we perceive and live with and build our culture and talk about fire, which does not mean a nod to like, oh, and beneficial fire is important. It means a complete change in the conversation. And like that has to be true here. Like, technology has such an important role to play, but it has to be from this space that we are creating a change in culture and a change in the way that we interact with fire. And until we are there, we're going to read about the next prediction and have more of these same problems.
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's go there.
Let's get into that.
Let's go there. So there certainly has been a resurgence of a deeper understanding of beneficial fire and thinking about the resources that we currently have and what that mindset needs to look like in the future from a fire management, fire suppression mindset to one of fire intensity management. And so Kate, why don't I kick this one over to you because you're right, Sasha. We do need to change the way that we are looking at this problem and how we deploy those resources to be able to solve that.
So I want this conversation with you and with Bob, but I'm going to experiment a little bit, and I was trying to kind of lead us into this because you're so right. You are so correct that beneficial fire is the destination point. That's what we wrapped the Gordon and Betty Moore initiative around. 2075, beneficial fire is the dominant amount of fire out there. But how do we get there? And this idea of fire intensity management, we have spent the last 100+ years, like you said, living under a fire suppression model that assumed, and I just want to point, you can't quite see it here, that assumed that this fire line, this edge of the fire line was the enemy. That we had to attack the edge and stop it. It was turn it off, bad. Anywhere it appeared, bad, turn it off.
That looks like a beautiful fire to me, by the way.
Well, it is. It's very low intensity. It is. But conceptually, and we taught our firefighters, respond to this edge, forget what's happening inside in the black, turn your back to it, look to the outside, and stop it. And that's not going to be our future. Our fire suppression model, and we'll talk about this if you join me at the 3:30 session, recalibrating the fire suppression model. But here's what I think we can do, Sasha. We can, and we have the technology in place today, we can continue to manage the edges, the perimeters for public safety, life and property loss. But we can manage the interior of fires for beneficial impact. Now let me give you some statistics. Roughly, California burns 800,000 acres a year. That's a 10-year average of our previous 10 years. Roughly 800,000 acres a year. 60% of that would clock as low to moderate beneficial fire. We are burning 400,000 acres of beneficial fire in this state right now, every year, and we don't count it. We don't even look at it. We don't talk about it, we don't metric it, we don't train for it, we don't fight fire for it, and we're building a prescribed fire system. Like, you guys are the ambassadors of what we need to do culturally, but we are not assessing our existing emergency fire suppression model against the beneficial fire goals that we have and connecting those two dots. And we have a tremendous workforce in our fire suppression system. We need to help understand and tool them up to be able to promote beneficial fire at the same time that we're doing perimeter management for public safety. Simultaneously, every acre of fire that is lit should be managed for a predestined intensity level. So that's my hope. That gets us to the 1 to 4 million acres a year of beneficial fire that we're looking for in California. And then I'm going to step back and let you and Bob see where you want to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's the future of this really, as we make this cultural shift, is when we have an ignition, assessing where we can manage it for resource benefit and for that resilience impact, and then looking at where we need to manage the edge to limit its growth and protect community safety. And until we're there with every ignition and we can assess each ignition and look at, like, where can we take this for resilience and stewardship, and where can we suppress this to protect community and safety? I think we're, like, that's where we need to go. and I see it starting, the Six Rivers Complex, Lightning Complex this year up in Northern California. I was a FOBS or field observer on that one, and getting to see and witness that future in action there, where they managed most of that fire for resource benefit and attacked it indirectly by scaling out to distant ridge lines and doing a ton of indirect beneficial firing. Like, that's a huge component of the future, and that's how we see meaningful change. And technology is so important in being able to do that. And without technology, that's very difficult, if not near impossible, to accomplish.
Yep, I like that. Yeah.
So I'm in total agreement with the use of beneficial fire, but I have to throw out a challenge to everybody in this room. Everybody in this room probably agrees that beneficial fire needs to be done. Outside of this room, if I go 6 blocks into Oakland and find out how many people know what that is and how many people would support that when they're breathing smoke, the answer is quite different. So what we need to do is invest in social science and technology to be able to support the argument and the benefits of beneficial fire. We have had certain fires that were determined that we would manage them for resource benefit, and the fires got passed, okay? And we had bonus acres, okay, as we'll call it. But another technology tool could be is, what type of decision support tools can we give to those incident commanders who have to make those decisions on go, no go, what flank of the fire to burn or let no? If we can provide them better decision support tools, we'll have a higher rate of success to take away the naysayers, who that's going to be the hard-end fight that we have to fight.
I'm going to elaborate on that model a little bit, because I want to connect the vapor pressure deficit graph that we saw, where we know the hotter and drier is coming. And some of the leading research soon to be published out of UCLA is going to show us that our fire severity increase frequency curve is going to go at a steeper climb between now and 2050, and then it starts to level at 2050 and remains high, but at a flatter increase. So the next 25 years are the most critical years to put as much fire on the ground out there in the West that we can possibly stomach. It is critical that we burn as much as we can before we hit 2050, because the ecosystems will have a chance to recover, given the moisture that we're getting predicted between now and 2050. our ecosystems have a chance, if we burn now, to survive for the repeated burns that they're going to be exposed to between 2050 and 2100. So I'm not a fan of keep all fires small. I'm a fan of grow them as large as possible under an intensity management model so that they're burning at 90% low to moderate intensity. We can do this. We have the technology to do this today. We need huge fire footprints in California. We need safe communities at the time that we do that, but we need the most amount of acres out there that we can possibly tolerate for the next 25 years. And that's going to take our fire suppression force and our prescribed fire ambassadors and our cultural fire advocates and our social change all pointed at that goal.
All right, so we got just a couple minutes left. And so I thought we would end on this question. And that is, if you were going to advise a fire tech company who is looking to engage with a local, state, federal, tribal government, what advice would you give?
Well, first of all, don't give up, because I know many of you have been knocking on doors and asking for introductions. Just don't give up. You have to understand that technology is going faster than what the bureaucracy of public government has traditionally budgeted and funded. You have to go, away from capital investments to more of lease programs that are tied to advancements in technology. You also have to take and look at our current environment to where we have to be forward-thinking. We have to show people what it means to accomplish what needs to be done 25 to 50 years out, because technology and our movement will take that long to get there.
I would say there are a lot of really amazing nonprofit and NGO partners across at least Northern California. I just can't speak for Southern California, that are doing really innovative work with human technology around workforce and implementing prescribed fire. And we're nimble because we're NGOs. And so if you come to the NGOs and you talk with us about what you're working on developing and what you want to try, I can almost guarantee you that any of us NGO partners that are doing this work are going to be excited to try something new with you. And we'll be excited to give you feedback on where the technology you're developing can really plug in and support augmenting the work we're doing. So I'd say maybe broaden your horizons if you've been focusing on agencies. That might be where a big contract exists, but if you're looking to just do field testing and get involved, that's a really good way to move forward.
What Sasha said.
Thanks.
And my advice would be, don't give up. I believe that those that are public servants owe it to you to spend time and learn about what it is that you're doing. Also, on a more practical level, on December 12th, the Office of Wildfire Technology Research and Development Advisory Board, I believe it's a 9-person board, appointees both from the governor's office, the Senate, the Assembly, Cal Fire, Cal OES, and I think I'm missing one other representative. They will be having a meeting December 12th. It's open to the public in Sacramento. It's going to be, it was developed under Senate Bill 109, so encourage you just to keep track of that, know that that's out there, and that is a mechanism for different types of technology and innovation to be brought forward and run through the process. Certainly, Chief Gregory can provide more information on that as well. Just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the panel discussion today. It was really a privilege and an honor for all of us to be able to share with you our perspective as practitioners with technology and innovation. So thank you very much.